Marking 1 year of his presidency, a Gallup survey found diplomacy was the top reason for both approval and disapproval for President Yoon Suk Yeol's policies. So we want to focus on his main foreign policy vision, making Korea a global pivotal state. Our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young is in the studio to dissect what this vision signifies and why it matters for South Koreans. Welcome, Sooyoung.
Hi, Dami.
So, branching South Korea's foreign policy beyond North Korea or even simple trade issues is quite an unprecedented move for the nation. What's behind Yoon's goal of becoming a world power then?
Well, to begin with, South Korea is no longer a small country. In terms of economic size or cultural influence, it became the world's 10th largest economy in 2021. It's home to Samsung, LG, and Hyundai Motor, and its rapid pace of industrialization has become a model of socio-economic development around the world. Its cultural influence has grown astronomically through K-pop, K-dramas, and films, its social values resonating globally despite the language barrier. Well, it's no longer a country that simply observes or bandwagons on various geopolitical conflicts and economic complexities in the world today, but it's a vibrant liberal democracy.
Korea is being called upon to deal with a larger number of security issues. Korea cannot focus on the Korean Peninsula anymore, or not even Northeast Asia anymore. We have seen how it is cooperating with Europe, for example, when it comes to supporting Ukraine against Russia, but we have seen a growing cooperation with Australia, with India, with countries in Southeast Asia. There are more calls for South Korea to do more. And in the past, Korea could have said, well, we don't have the assets to do so, but that's not the case anymore. And you see,
right, the Yoon administration appears to have been stepping up a lot more to do more, especially during the last few months. Can you give us some of the examples then?
Right, so even when he was a candidate for presidency, he pledged to step up South Korea's role in the world during his electoral campaign, and he turned this pledge into a policy with the Global Pivotal State vision. His government also drew up an Indo-Pacific strategy showing support for preserving a free and rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region, including the freedom of navigation. In a speech to the US Congress and Harvard University, as we saw last month, he emphasized that South Korea will now match its economic capacity by standing up for universal values, voicing support for Ukraine, and condemning North Korea's human rights atrocities.
I see South Korea really at the top of the heap right now in terms of demonstrating its own determination to be one of America's best allies, but not only to be one of America's best allies, but to be a global leader. The efforts that the current administration in Seoul has taken to reach out to other Asian Pacific countries, including Japan, by the way, the statements that President Yoon has made, whether it's regarding the need for a free and open Indo-Pacific, his statements in support of the importance of democracy and open markets, and economic exchange between and among free economics exchange between and among all parties, the desire to be, as he and his administration have put it, a global pivotal state.
And at the same time, South Korea standing up for democracy and universal values has not so pleased its biggest trading partner, China. Then why take the risk?
Well, let's be frank here. Neither China nor Russia have been very instrumental or helpful in restraining North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Let's not forget how China helped North Korea during the 1950 to 53 Korean War. Now, Beijing and Pyongyang are somewhat akin to allies based on their agreement in 1961, where they agreed to assist each other militarily. And politically speaking today as well, China and Russia's veto power in the United Nations Security Council, that has really thwarted efforts to condemn or further sanction Pyongyang for its belligerent actions. As South Korea faces a growing threat from North Korea, not to mention economic uncertainty, Seoul has found that it really needs to align itself with the United States and the free world. And President Yoon reiterated that we cannot rely on the goodwill of other countries. This not only applies to North Korea, but as the president said, South Korea has no choice but to rely on the US for security, as Beijing does not enforce UN sanctions on North Korea, as he said, at all. Not to mention, betting on the Chinese market is quite risky, especially as global companies are already wary of Beijing stealing technology as well as its stringent government controls. And during a time when geopolitical rifts, these technological shifts that we're seeing, and the COVID-19 pandemic have really reshaped global trading and supply chains, countries are seeking like-minded partners around the world. South Korea is just the same, as its economic future depends on a liberal world order.
And history has shown that if you rely on a goodwill, any possible goodwill on the part of this kind of centralized political system, every time you lose. As a democracy, history has taught us that we have to take side with democracy. And in that sense, with China trying to show its muscles and trying to project its power, even talking about by force unifying Taiwan, we don't really have a choice. And we have to work with our democratic allies.
Right, we've seen President Yoon Suk Yeol emphasizing the importance of economic security and also mentioning defense exports, semiconductor supply chains, among other things, right?
Right, yes, definitely. And in this era where we're seeing advanced technologies really transform every industry and society, affecting everything from social media to missile and space technology, it's becoming crucial that countries procure the materials, the means of production, and the human resources as well to master these essential future technologies. And this is all the more important for South Korea and its highly export-dependent economy, which has recorded a trade deficit for an unprecedented 13 consecutive months.
So we have superior technology. That's our strength, and we're the leader in the semiconductor industry. But we are also facing fierce competition between TSMC and other leading semiconductor companies. So we have to continue developing the technological frontier to ensure that we have technological leadership. And also at the same time, our weakness is that we are too much concentrated in export to China and the United States.
The growing overlap of traditional and economic interests is another reason for Seoul to pursue its global pivotal state strategy. The Yoon administration has been strengthening cooperation with NATO, setting up a mission to Brussels last year.
Then NATO is an obvious institution to work with because you also have the US in it, and it allows you to strengthen relations with Germany, France, the UK, countries with which Korea, a single out in the Indo-Pacific strategy, wants to have stronger links. So this means practical cooperation, not only discussions about potential cooperation, but practical cooperation in areas such, for example, the development of new weapon technologies, dealing with cybersecurity through tabletop exercises, exchanges of information as well.
The president has also been seeking for more strategic partnerships in an age of geopolitical rivalry and economic uncertainty with countries like the United Arab Emirates.
South Korea with the miracle of Han River and the UAE with its miracle in the desert are both economic powerhouses with a tremendous potential synergy. The UAE has been a regional and global leader in innovation, offering many areas of cooperation from economic and security relations to climate change, space, and regional and global leadership. The UAE has already given us a decisive help in recent evacuation operation for Koreans in Sudan, which shows the UAE's influence to the world. Especially in this era of geopolitical rivalry, the UAE is essential strategic partners, or Arabic words, Rafiq, for Korea. And Seoul should also extend its reach across the desert to other GCC countries such as Saudi Arabia.
Right, despite Yoon's grand global plans to beef up South Korea's economy, what people really want to see is a stronger local economy and job creation, though.
That's right. I mean, the president, he's called himself on various occasions South Korea's #1 salesman, already gaining billions of dollars in investments. But the question is how to sell his foreign policy achievements to the general public, 60% of whom are not impressed by his first year in office, according to most polls this week that saw his approval rating average at around 38%.
My belief is that, judging from the votes that he got when he entered the office, which was less than 1% of margin as compared to the other side, it's inevitable for him to face the reality where 30% of Koreans will never probably support him, no matter what he does. And about 30% of Koreans will continue to support him regardless.
I think it's all about messaging. A poll by the Federation of Korean Industries last month shows that South Koreans largely favor maintaining or strengthening relations with the US. Another survey on the younger generation found that they mostly support building future-oriented ties with Japan. Now, that's quite surprising if you think about the domestic backlash against his move to mend fences with Tokyo. This means that the general public disagree with the style rather than the substance of Yoon's diplomacy.
I feel and I sense certain risk here for him to go too fast, too much, too forthcoming in certain issues, particularly in dealing with popular sentiment with regard to Japan. So I would like to see him being a little bit more careful, a little bit more balancing, while he keeps his sense of direction that I hold.
As President Yoon said, diplomacy and domestic affairs are now two sides of the same coin, given how the future of the country relies on its national and economic security. And, well, Dami, I think it's really a matter of driving that message home.
That is indeed the challenge. Now, on top of those approaches to his foreign policies, the Yoon administration has taken a rather hard stance on North Korea and also when it came to handling Korean Peninsula issues, right?
That's right, a notable difference from the previous administration. I mean, the recent Washington Declaration is another example of Yoon's sort of no-nonsense approach to handling North Korea issues.
Right, and also Dash's initiatives in the beginning of his administration last year. Yeah, let's turn to our Choi Min-jung for details.
Sure.
Over the past year, President Yoon has pursued a hardline stance toward North Korea, mainly to counter Pyongyang's evolving nuclear threats. In August 2022, 3 months after taking office, Yoon proposed his main North Korea policy, dubbed the Audacious Initiative. The president offered to support Pyongyang in reviving its crippled economy in return for efforts toward denuclearization.
저는 북한이 핵 개발을 중단하고 실질적인 비핵화로 전환한다면 그 단계에 맞춰 북한의 경제와 민생을 획기적으로 개선할 수 있는 담대한 구상을 지금 이 자리에서 제안합니다.
However, North Korea slammed Yoon's initiative, calling it foolish, and instead ramped up its missile activities. Last year alone, North Korea test-launched over 70 ballistic missiles. In response, the South Korean government responded by strengthening extended deterrence capabilities with the U.S. through joint drills and more recently by coming up with the Washington Declaration. Yoon also took a hardline approach when dealing with the regime's human rights issues. In March, the government released a report on North Korea's human rights abuses to the public. The annual report had not been made public in the past, reportedly to avoid provoking Pyongyang.
처참한 인권 유린의 실상이 국제사회에 낱낱이 드러나야 합니다. 통일부뿐만 아니라 교육부 등을 포함한 정부 각 부처는 이번 보고서 발간을 계기로 북한 인권 실상을 국내외에 널리 알리고 가르쳐야 합니다.
An expert says Yoon's strong North Korea policy makes sense as the regime is focused on its nuclear and missile capabilities.
No amount of engagement effort is going to suffice to entice North Korea to come back to the negotiation table. So it's only natural for South Korea and the international community to come out with a very strong response to that. And
Yoon has been taking a much more proactive approach compared to the former Moon Jae-in administration, as he said that Seoul must completely distance itself from the kind of peace that relies on the goodwill of the other party. However, some point out that the current administration could do more to ensure stability and security on the Korean peninsula. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And going back to what you introduced earlier, beefing up the local economy has been the top of his been on top of his to-do list, right?
That's right. So that push really includes boosting businesses and also pursuing innovation in the public sector as well to drive that private sector investment.
Right, that's exactly in line with the country raising the national budget to 5.1% this year from last year.
That's correct, yeah.
And there are also challenges for Yoon administration to overcome in the next 4 years, like still taming the inflation and consumer prices and also coping with the US CHIPS Act.
Indeed, lots of challenges ahead.
Right. Well, for that, we have our Lee Dae-hyun to tell us more.
Great.
With a clear focus on freedom, innovation, fairness, and solidarity, the Yoon administration has been working on creating a private sector-led economy over the past year.
정부 주도가 아닌 민간 중심의 경제로 전환하여 일자리를 창출하고 중산층을 더욱 두텁게 할 것입니다.
The first step, boosting businesses. The Yoon administration has been working to ease more than 170 business regulations and 140 disciplinary measures by listening to the voices of frontline workers. It sought an increase in business investments by cutting corporate taxes, providing more tax credits for national strategic technologies, and temporary investment tax incentives. Next, innovation in the public sector. With a sound fiscal policy in mind, the government tightened the purse strings as the national budget bill had increased 5.1% this year from 2022. It has also focused on efficiency by reorganizing public institutes to reduce unnecessary quotas and expenses. The Yoon administration has also been proactively adopting an emergency framework to ease market concerns, including expanding the market liquidity public fund program amid volatile bonds and funds markets. 13 emergency economic meetings and over 20 ministerial roundtables were held to tame market fears. In terms of the housing market, it has eased some home loan regulations while abolishing tax penalties on multiple homeowners. Last but not least, the current administration is working to increase public welfare by protecting vulnerable groups. Despite global inflation, the country's inflation is back to the 3% level after 14 months and down from a peak of 6% last July. And it has reached an all-time high employment rate as well. Measures including lowering fuel taxes, providing energy vouchers, and expanding tariff rate quota on energy and food were also rolled out. Welfare expenses for low-income households rose 12% from the previous year. However, some concerns remain. Sluggish exports in the IT sector remain amid a drop in chip demand. Consumer prices, too, are still above the government's target, with fears lingering due to external factors such as commodity prices. One expert has some advice on the task the administration should focus on.
Other countries, for example, are using their budget to resolve the energy crisis while responding to industrial policy competition. The IRA and the US CHIPS Act are examples the South Korean government could look to.
He also agreed with how the government urged the importance of improving the market paradigm, such as nurturing talent and in creating a flexible industry ecosystem following industrial shifts. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang.News.
1 year has indeed flown by with President Yoon Suk Yeol putting himself on the forefront on the global stage.
That's right, from presenting South Korea as a global pivotal state to handling Korean Peninsula issues to promoting future growth engines. It's been quite a year for President Yoon.
Right. Let's see how his calendar for the next 4 years unfolds. Thanks, Sooyoung, for coming in today.
Thanks so much for having me.